So I suppose a question that's going to be asked more often than not, Dan, is how much equity can a customer release?
Yes, it's almost the first question that most people ask, and I think there's really there's two sides to this question. There's how much can you release, so what's possible, and the other side of it is what's sensible. What is the best practice in terms of how much you release? I mean, the younger that you are, the less you can release. The amount available is a calculation between the age of the younger borrower and the value of the property.
And I suppose it's an important one for people to understand, isn't it? In that a 55-year-old who lives till in their 80s or 90s or perhaps beyond, it'd be a long time before that provider would see the return of that capital from the proceeds of a sale.
Yes, and because payments towards the interest are optional, they've got to leave enough margin in there to allow for compound interest over maybe 40 years, which is why at 55 you may be able to borrow up to 30% of your value of your property, but right at the top end, which is going to be very high interest rates. If you come back down towards 10, 20% of the value of the property, then you're going to get a much more friendly rate. That goes right up to when you're 85 plus, you might be able to borrow around 57% of the value of the property. But a much better idea, if you need this sort of money, to borrow 30 to 50%, which would give you a much more sustainable interest rate and keep a check on the amount of compound interest that's going to add on to that. In some cases, where people have underlying medical conditions, there are lenders that can take this into account, and they look at your life expectancy based on these medical conditions, and they may be able to offer you more money at a given age or slightly better terms. So it's always worth disclosing any medical details to your advisor so that they can make sure that they can get the best possible deal in the market for you, even if it's using medical underwriting.
And the logic there being, of course, that the lender is more likely to get the capital back sooner.
Yes, they're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. It's a logical decision that if someone has a life-limiting condition, then they're going to live less time, and the lender will get their money back sooner.
And what type of medical conditions have you come across where customers have been able to receive a higher amount?
Well, you find that in two ways. You get the very serious ones like cancer, and certainly if someone's had one or two episodes of cancer and it's a particularly aggressive form, that's always going to trigger medical underwriting. But what you also find is that lifestyle factors can affect. So if someone's a smoker, if they have blood pressure, high blood pressure, diabetes, what you'll find is that quite often these conditions go hand in hand. And if someone has 2 or 3 less serious indicators, that might also trigger medical underwriting. One of the lenders claims that 60% of customers could benefit from medical underwriting. Certainly it's becoming more apparent in the industry, and the range of conditions and small enhancements that are possible are good there. I mean, I think in terms of when we're talking about what you can borrow, it's important also to think in terms of what you need to borrow. So what often happens is someone will make an inquiry and say that they need 25,000 for a new kitchen, 20,000 for a new roof, these sorts of things. Now, apart from looking at grant funding to be able to reduce that outlay, it's also a useful idea to go and get some quotes because if you're borrowing 25,000 for a kitchen that's only going to cost you 17,000, then that's something that we can use to reduce the amount of borrowing that's needed, and again to reduce the impact on the customer's estate.
And this is obviously a very high ethical way of transacting. And didn't you have a recent example where a client was applying for equity release that, in fact, was another option available to them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The client approached me. His wife is experiencing the early stages of Alzheimer, but still has capacity to understand what's going on, but has had a recent hip operation, which hasn't really done the job. And his wife's really struggling to get upstairs and to look after herself. And this is they've been told that this is just going to get worse. Now, they've had an assessment through social services, and they don't meet the threshold criteria to qualify for funding. So they approached us for equity release to raise 30, maybe even 40,000 to cover the adaptations to the house that they wanted to make. When we look at the alternatives for this, we're able to identify a charity and another avenue of local authority funding, which is going to mean that they're going to manage to get most of the work done on grants or incredibly low interest funding from the local authority. So they will still need equity release to meet some of their criteria, but what they're looking at is now far less than what they originally approached us for.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff, and like I say, it says a lot about the ethics of yourself, Dan, and how we approach things as a company here to make sure we've exhausted all the other options before embarking on the equity release option. Thanks for your time, Dan. That's brilliant.
Thank you.